Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Maryland Recycling Network's webinar on research and insights into recycling behavior inside the home. I'm Peter Haustel, MRN's Executive Director, and will soon be joined by Elizabeth Schussler and Lydia Keenan from the Recycling Partnership. They're going to talk about the groundbreaking research they recently completed and how you can apply their findings to your operations to get higher participation and lower contamination for your recycling programs. But before we go there, let's take a minute to look at what's coming up on the MRN calendar. So starting on Wednesday, May 15th, we have a webinar with Chaz Miller and Darius Irani looking at recycling materials markets and economic trends for the Mid-Atlantic region. And then on Monday, June 10th, at the Turf Valley Conference Center in Ellicott City, you can catch the MRN and SWANA Mid-Atlantic Annual Conference. We have a great program and a room full of exhibitors lined up to give you ideas, tools, and techniques you can use to help you get the most out of your recycling program. Then on Monday, June 10th, at the Turf Valley Conference Center in Ellicott City, you can catch the MRN and SWANA Mid-Atlantic Annual Conference. We have a great program and a room full of exhibitors lined up to give you innovative ideas, tools, and techniques you can use to help you get the most out of your recycling program. Then we follow up on Thursday, June 27th, where I hope you'll join the MRN volunteer team to help the folks at the loading dock in Baltimore boost reuse of building materials in Maryland. Oh, and there's a great bonus benefit. In addition to their amazing warehouse, the loading dock has one of the largest collections of graffiti and street art in Maryland located on their property. Roughly 100 local, national, and international artists are represented. And they also have a certified wildlife habitat on site too. Too cool for words, so be sure to check it out and sign up today. And last but not least, on Thursday, July 25th, we have another webinar coming up featuring the folks from HelpSee. Lisa Scianella will tell us about the great programs they've set up for Baltimore County, the City of Baltimore, Frederick County, and Montgomery County to divert textiles from Maryland's waste stream. So, while most of these programs are free, they depend on the financial support of our members. As I'm sure you've heard me say many times before, we don't have any non-members. We just have paying members and non-paying members. So if you're one of those non-paying members, please head over to our website after this program and join today. You can become a member for as little as $25 a year. That's like 50 cents a week. So speaking of support, I want to give a shout out to our sustaining and patron members whose contributions, along with that of all our members, help us continue to support your efforts to drive reduction, reuse, and recycling in Maryland. So regardless of how much you decide to pay, please become a paying member today. Thank you. Okay, without further ado, it's time to turn the mic and screen over to Elizabeth and Lydia so they can share their ideas and inspiration with you. Elizabeth, Lydia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Peter, and welcome, everyone. We're so happy to be here with you today. My name is Elizabeth Schussler. I'm with the Recycling Partnership. We have are about almost 2 years into starting the Center for Sustainable Behavior and Impact. So Lydia and myself, Lydia Keenan is here with us. Lydia and myself work on behavior, understanding what has people making the decisions they're making, whether they're recycling or not recycling or choosing to contaminate, etc., and what needs to be done to help individuals in the household down the streets, across the routes, and then ultimately across the country, because there are a lot of trends that overlap. So if you don't mind, we heard a little bit from that point of view, what's troubling your program. So you can skip that last question. But in the chat, if you'll say where you're joining us from and what your role is, that would be really great. And let's look at some of our recent research and insights from this in-home behavior. I also added a question about contamination in the chat there. If you happen to know what a contaminant you're facing, like we call that the top issue. If you happen to know your top issue or your recycling or your contamination rate, also drop that in the chat. That helps us as well. So again, myself, Elizabeth, and Lydia are here with you today. The research that we're presenting also includes research team members that are not with us today, but I do want to shout out to them for their contributions to this presentation. So this, Asami Tanemoto on our team looks at what's generated in the household and what's captured, meaning the recyclables are in the right container and the trash is in the right container. And then, you know, what contamination numbers are, et cetera. So Asami, if you have any studies that have data like that you're willing to share, it's great for us to better understand what happens in local programs. And then what we know is like, on the next slide, what we know is like, not everyone's participating, but let's say on average, let's say there's a street with 10 houses, not everyone's participating. Let's say 7 houses are participating. And within those 7 houses, they're not capturing everything they can. All the recyclables that could be recycled in that program are not making it into the recycling cart. So that's what we talk about when we talk about a capture rate, or when we talk about a generation rate. Generation is what's available. Capture is what makes it to the recycling cart in the right in the program. So we have some data. How we run these capture rates is, you know, it's very glamorous work. If you've ever done a waste sort, you can probably smell these slides as they show on your screen. We have a team that pulls recycling and trash and goes through and looks at how much of each is where. And so what you see here is that process of going through that. It's kind of a cumbersome process, but it gives us great information so that we can address the behaviors that led up to these things being where they are. So some average numbers for our programs. What you'll see here is, again, like the whole city will have a a capture rate, but participants have a slightly higher capture rate. So a participant is someone who is recycling at least once in a month, is what we call a participant. And then you can see here these numbers. This is an ever-changing number, but you can see here, you know, cardboard participants are capturing 81% of it. And that is like, I know we have Chaz Miller here. Chaz could talk a lot about the differences in these percentages, but having this level of information will help you understand, is your specific behavior ask, is it about a specific material? Like, can you prioritize what you're asking, like unbag your recyclables? We've seen that reduce contamination and increase capture. So on the next slide, just a little bit recap on the definitions. What we're thinking about when we're using measurements to understand behaviors is the pounds collected per household. Another number that I mentioned that's not on this list is the generation, is like what's available in a household. But some of the things that you might know in your program are the pounds collected in a household, a set out rate, a participation rate, and set out and participation are not the same thing, and a capture rate. And so if you're ready to dig into like how to get more out of your program, we have resources to help you use these measures to inform the behavior interventions. So that was the numbers part. And now let's talk a little bit more about the part that I'm more familiar with, and is the ethnographic research. So we went into homes with this team from Point Forward out of California. Oh gosh, I don't know if Tom and Brandon are on the call today. They might join us, but we've been into about 6 cities, into different households with them, talking with people about what works, what doesn't work, what's their like every recycler has kind of an origin story about recycling. They have the kinds of questions that trouble them or the kinds of relationships in their house. Like, it's not uncommon for us to hear like, oh, my spouse does not like insist that this thing is recyclable, but I know that it's not, and I have to go through and pick those out. So those are the kinds of stories. But what I want to talk about today is really the trends. Like, we're looking at how recyclables move through the home and what's needed to capture more. And then, like, there are plenty of things, like what we know from our research, that a lot of the problems that people have with recycling are the things that don't go in their household or residential recycling, the things that need to be taken back either to a store or a drop-off or a collection center. And that's including, deposit containers as well. Bulky things, anything like that. So when we went into the homes, we found, we continue, honestly, to find deeper information, like really deep insights into, like, we went in wondering, like, is twinning the bin really what's needed? Everyone just needs a bin in every room. And what we came up with was like, maybe. For some households, it will work. For some households, it won't work. But there are 4 homegrown systems. The other kind of indicator is the idea that things actually move. They don't become stagnant and pile up. They don't become a problem in the house or in the cart or, in the car on the way to drop off, that sort of thing. And then again, the drop off items complicate the system and flow for the resident, the curbside or the household recyclables. Excuse me. It's pollen season here in Western North Carolina. So again, is twinning the bin the answer? If you think about your home, maybe your office, maybe a friend or relative's home, like, it's not all the same. And yeah, it would probably be better if it were, but that's just not the way buildings have been built and space has been allocated. So the four homegrown systems. The first one is something that we call centralized bin free. So you can see this lady has, and she did mention that she used to have a small basket that was there, but she likes for the recyclables, once they're empty and clean, to be put by the trash container. And you can see kind of the footprint of her house. She lives in a small condo that's upstairs, and there aren't many rooms. There's not a lot of space. And so this way, her recycling is like, that's the best space for her to constantly, like, see it, manage it, bag it up, and take it down to the dumpster, the front end loader container, the dumpster, and empty. She did empty the bags out. She knew to empty the bags out, but she's got to transport those materials somehow down to the container. So the advantages are that she can see what's there, and she doesn't have to use a bin or take up other space in her very small kitchen. She did kind of flatten cardboard boxes and stack them in the dining area. And again, boxes kind of represent like that middle ground between something that's a drop-off item and the regular bottles and cans. And I'll mention more about boxes later. But the disadvantages is it's a lot of work. She probably has more trips down the steps. She has more things laying like around her house. And so there isn't like, if someone came over, they may not know what to do. Like, it would seem kind of odd to them to leave something empty on the counter or on the floor. So that's centralized bin free. And the second style is called centralized contained. This is what a lot of more recent households have, and cabinetry has moved towards, kitchen designs have moved towards, are these pull-out containers where things are in the trash and the recycling are side by side. This is a twinning the bin. The problem that we saw in the households was sometimes people don't know which is which, or they forget. And they also, it's tucked away, so it's not marked and it's tucked away. Those are things that could be potential solutions, is, marking which bin is which. The other thing you'll see here is she has bags in both bins. Like, people really want to bag their recyclables, and fewer people realize that they need to empty those bags or want to empty those bags. So the bagging of recyclables, again, is a big contaminant and a deterrent to capture. You can see here in the footprint of the house in the top right corner, the kitchen is in the back of the house. The recycling cart is in the front of the house, where that little red dot is at the very top. That's where the cart actually is. So there's also something in the transport from the place you're collecting, or the places you're collecting recyclables, to the outdoor bin. The other disadvantages is that it might fill up quickly, especially if cardboard goes in this size of a container. And it's also kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's also, one of the things I think about is it's putting trash and recycling side by side. It's marrying them, but they're not exactly the same. Trash isn't offering recycling anything. Recycling is, while it's things that you want to dispose of, it's actually, it would be great if it was elevated to a place where the expectation is that it's almost like if you're collecting clothes for donation, or it just has more value than trash. And so it's a little bit just downplaying the value of recycling, having it side by side in the minds of people. So, and the third style that we have is something called distributed gathering. Now, this was a relatively small house, but this family had multiple places where they were collecting, and they used not just a blue bin, but they used baskets, and that encouraged dry materials to go in there. And it meant that there was more of a flow, because the baskets would fill up. You can see in the one image, the bin under the desk is full and needs some attendance. But this was in an office. This bin was in one of the rooms, was used as an office. And so again, thinking about, like, different rooms have different generation of things in them, and that happens at a different rate or at different flows. And then the last kind of trend that we saw was out of sight, isolated. So this family had a recycling container, which was a standard plastic bin with a lid on it that had a bag inside, in their laundry room. And some of the things that they said were like, it helps us in the kitchen when we have something recyclable, we have to do something with it. So their trash was also not right by their sink. It was at the end of an island. And so, like, it's just a few more steps to get, like, you're going to go around the island, or you're going to go straight into the laundry room. So, like, thinking about if you've ever designed a kitchen, like thinking about designing recycling process in your home so that it is convenient, the same way the work triangle is in kitchen designs. And so I'm wondering, for the people on this call, we're going to do a little poll. Which one of these four is your system Or maybe you have a hybrid. Maybe you kind of use like some that like some parts of one and parts of another. So in the poll,
The race is on.
the race is on. The popcorn is back in the microwave.
And it looks like the hybrid system is ahead of distributed gathering and centralized contained, with centralized bin free being relatively low. And the responses are getting quiet now. Got a couple more. Again, you don't have to think too much about this. Just a good guess is good.
I see a note in the comments about passive aggressive communication around recycling. It is so true. So true. Boxes are another thing, like boxes piling up.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results we've got here. And you can see the hybrid system combines two or more of these is the top of the list. Centralized contain is second, and distributed gathering is third. And centralized bin free is a very distant fourth.
So as you can see, it varies. It depends. Like, would twinning the bin work? Well, you'd think everyone would say centralized, they would set up centralized bin free or set up the centralized contained in their homes if twinning the bin was the answer. Number two would always win. The thing is, bathrooms don't have a lot of space. So what seemed to work for people is like putting maybe a shampoo container or a box or something at the top of the stairs, or bless you, lady, or at the or like on the way out the door, or something like there's like these holding stations that are like in the path. And so like if they're in the path, they must be handled. So that gets us into the next topic, which is like the movement of these materials through the home. And so what we found was that the things moving is the flow of the recyclables, the bin being good enough. So for the person who said the under the cabinet bins are probably pretty small, so they probably fill up, even especially if there's some larger packaging that might go in there. And so good flow is another sort of when that we could identify solutions for. So this family, they collected things on the cabinet, on the countertop. He actually had a system. It was like 4 prongs and then a little bag went over the top of it. And that's where they collected all things trash and recycling for the next stage. I don't know about any of you, but I immediately was like, hey, did you work in restaurants? And he said, yes. And that's the way a lot of industrial or restaurants work, is like large enough to handle it, and also making the assumption that it's somebody's job to move the things along and expedite the process. So what they said, it's hard to read that tiny quote, but what they said is this on the counter system works for them. And he said, it might sound crazy, but I feel like having recycling on the counter is great, because when you get rid of it, it's gone. It disappears. We don't have to have a big can sitting there. So you can see what's on the counter, and then to get rid of it. Again, they had kind of a smallish kitchen, and they had a bigger trash can out of sight from the picture there. But and then their recycling happened, like the kitchen's in the back of the house, and their recycling happened out of the garage that's in the front of the house. So things have to flow because the kitchen's in the back and the recycling goes out the front. Things are having to flow a pretty good distance. So another household where the flow was a little bit stagnant, and there were log jams, was this house where their front room really was a staging area for all things. They have a new baby, and anyone who has brought a baby into a home knows that babies come with unexpected things often. Lots of boxes, lots of like aging out of clothes, like aging out of supplies, that sort of thing. So they have this room that is operating as their kind of like things are coming into the house. They also tried to like purpose this room for things going out of the house. And then it just sort of became, I'm sure it makes sense to them, but you know, upon seeing this, it doesn't entirely make sense to us. So we did ask questions about like how they sort through. It turns out they have another bedroom, the guest bedroom, where there were like the next level of important things coming in. So some of the complaints, some of what you see here under the picture, it says, yeah, I would definitely say if things are starting to pile up in our house, I'll personally just throw it in the trash. Or if we have a lot of it and it doesn't all feel fit in recycling, we'll throw things in the trash. So from our qualitative research that you see here and our quantitative research, there are a lot of people whose carts are filling up with boxes, and those boxes are displacing other recyclables. So that's something to consider as well when you're improving the capture, is making sure that the capacity within the home with those smaller bins and outside in the carts, the capacity is a good fit for the amount of material that's generated, and offering some options for those, especially if it's every other week collection. And then the third thing that we found was these drop-off items, especially the film and flexibles, any of the like case wrap, around paper towels and toilet paper, around like shopping bags. Many communities and states have issued bag bans for, you know, stores not giving out these plastic bags or offering people them for a price. But even without that, it's staggering to know how much of this film and flexibles plastic is in the house, even by weight, because you'd think like it's so light, there's not much of it, but there is as much of this as there might be in like cans and bottles. So there is a lot of film and flexibles, and we have to find solutions for these. We have to find solutions that are convenient for people, and we don't want them in the MRF unless the MRF is designed to accept them and handle them, and ideally has a market for them. Not ideally, has a market for them. I'll take back the word ideally. So what people specifically around, I was also reviewing some batteries and electronics information this morning. So, you know, if film and flexibles isn't the thing, like think about it like batteries, think about it like clothing, think about bulky items, think about yard waste, things that don't belong in the recycling cart. People have a lot of questions. We spend a lot of time educating and correctively educating people on what goes in the bin. And there's also needs to be convenient solutions for the things that don't go in the bin, but have the potential for another life. So again, in review, that's the things that are kind of the components of trends that we see are the homegrown systems. There's not one that's working like way better for everyone. The flow, and I would say that the systems, like there's not one system, because the flow, it's a lot to do with who's in charge of doing what in the house. And then the drop off, again, is getting in the way of, it's kind of like the frustration with the things that don't go in the cart is sort of transferring over to become a frustration about recycling in general, where, you know, many items need to go back. Household hazardous waste, lithium batteries, that sort of thing. Those things have got to be handled. Textiles, they have to be handled with special care. So understanding, like what do you do? You're a community. You're not going to be able, if you're able to do this ethnographic research, great. I'd love to come join you. And if you're not, like, you can still at events just ask people to walk you through their process. Find out the kinds of systems. We've had some great luck with offering in-home bins for some people. And then, like, add a question about the number of bins or gathering spots to the surveys if you're doing surveys. And then I'm going to pause there for a second. I see there was a lot of there were a lot of comments in the chat. Yes. So the idea that also, you know, bottles and cans and flattened paper and food packaging, like when you're in the grocery store, this is something else you can do. Like, just take an extra trip to the store and look around and go up and down the aisles and see the things, not as a shopper, but see the things as someone who is responsible for managing these packages. And look at when people are in the lane checking out, is their grocery cart overflowing, or do most people have, like, you know, 5 or 10 things? And so that gives you a sense of kind of the things and the flow of the things that are going into homes. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the in-home bin projects that we've conducted on the ground. So just backing up a bit, I didn't mention, if you'll pop back one slide, Lydia, I didn't mention that this work is, I contributed to some of it, but Alita Kane is really, this is her baby, is these, you know, in-home bins, how to offer them, who to offer them to, how to offer them to people, and then how to measure whether or not they're working, and how they're working. So backing up a little bit on the next slide is, like, if you look at your program back to Asami's numbers of like average generation and average capture, let's just say, for instance, that your program is capturing like 100 pounds a household a year. So that if you have curbside opt-in, you can expect to get about that. In the next, like, if you have bins and they're collected on a regular schedule, that goes up, that everyone has the chance to recycle and they've been given a tote. Then when you go, what we've found from, we've given, so the Recycling Partnership is we're celebrating our 10th year anniversary, and we're like, I think it's like 1.85 million carts we've deployed across the country through grants. So when you give a cart to every resident, what you'll find is that pounds per household goes up quite a bit. And if you give it with good education and support, it'll actually double what it was from bins. So if you have information on what is being collected, that's a good first place to look at. Like, if we want to change behaviors, let's look at the data that we have that's relating to the behaviors. So that pounds per household should be pretty easy to calculate without, you know, hiring a consultant or spending money on a study. So what we've seen is a little bit of a variety as to the how, like who to give the bins to or who to make them available to. We sent out a business reply mailer with a pre-printed address on it. So all someone had to do was say, yes, I want an in-home bin, and tear it off and put it back in the mail. They didn't have to put a stamp on it. They didn't have to write their address on it. We ran that a couple of times in Cincinnati in a couple of different ways, and we got about 20 to 25% response rate on that mailer. And if you've worked in mail order or anything like that, that's a tremendous response rate. We find tremendous response rates related to recycling. People are hungry for information and support. So when in the if we'll looking at the next slide, we gave in-home bins to those 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people who requested them. What we found in one of the studies was in-home bins could actually get people who are not participating to participate. So if you could figure out a route or a street or part of the community that is not yet recycling and offer them this support, it can be enough to get them going. Like if you just imagine the kinds of things you have in your life of, gosh, I'm going to do that at some point. I mean to do that. I want to do that, but I'm not yet doing it because there are these hurdles. But if someone shows up and says, hey, person at this address, you could have an in-home bin, and that bin is the thing that gets you to like over that, like holding that task of like, I need to start doing that, but I'm not. Like if that's what works to get somebody started. So we did find that that was, we compared against a control, and we found that I believe it was about 20% of the non-recyclers began to participate. 20% more participation overall. Yeah, but Alita Kane is the word there. She has all the stats if you want to meet with her or talk with her. And then, so you can identify the audience by saying who, like, are you going to go for the non-recyclers or the not yet recyclers, I like to call them, or infrequent recyclers, or are you going to offer it to everyone? Is it first come, first serve? I remember hearing about a program in the Northwest where they offered these free bins, and they like just said they're going to be available on this day for pickup. And they had people waiting in line an hour to get one. So just think about like what's the best way to offer them, and what's the best way to deliver them, what to deliver them with. And then if you can measure the outcomes, that's ideal, because you'll want to know, like if you take the $20 a household that it might cost to get like this in-home kit out, and you say it's going to like these 1,000 people or 3,000 people, like, and you look at that across those community, then it gets down to like $7 a house. So what we've put out in our Paying It Forward report and also in our State of Recycling report is we really think that ideally communities spend about $10 a household a year on average to communicate with people. And our policy work is based on recommending that as well. It's a lot, but talking with folks in the Northwest, in Seattle and Portland, where some of the most successful programs are, they've been doing that for decades. And so that's why their recycling rates look a bit better than recycling rates that you will see in the SOAR report. So let's see what else I can offer you is, I guess we'll just, like if we have time for questions, we can do those at the end, but I would like to tell you that we're using this data, we're using this research, and we're creating solutions. And Lydia is going to tell us a bit about our recent and exciting solutions. So I'm going to stop talking and pass off to Lydia.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Did you want to say anything about this QR code? I don't know if anyone needs to scan it, but I can skip ahead if that's okay. All right, perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. I actually learned a lot. I didn't know some of the stats and that information about some of our work, so that was really great. Even as someone who works with you on a regular basis, so that was really awesome. But yeah, I'm gonna kind of, like Elizabeth said, not shift gears entirely, but a little bit talk about some of the solutions that we're building at the partnership. But first, we're talking a lot about household behavior, and I just, want to emphasize, like, why are we focusing on this, right? But when it comes to recycling, there's what we call a belief behavior gap. So on one hand, there's extremely high levels of public support for recycling, but on the other hand, half of residential recyclables are lost to landfills every year due to behavior gaps. That adds up to about 15 million tons of recyclables, which is, a significant amount. So that is just one of the reasons we focus specifically on these household behaviors. So we have this belief behavior gap, but we also know that there's more than 9,000 individual recycling programs across the United States. They all have, various accepted materialists. They have different collection methods, a lot of diversity among these programs. And you've also probably noticed that if you've tried to recycle in one location while you're traveling, the recycling rules are different than what you might experience at home. So this is the case for, all consumers all over the United States, and it's really no wonder that people are confused how to participate in their programs, especially if those rules are changing as they move around and changing even within their own city on a regular basis. And I do also want to call out the acceleration of extended producer responsibility, or EPR legislation, as Maryland is familiar with. But that's another factor that we think about, right? So that means that companies must comply with these new rules to maintain their position in the marketplace and ensure they'll be able to recover the packaging they're putting out into the market. So the recycling rules are different across the country. There's new laws and regulations being passed, and there's a diverse landscape. There we go. And there's a diverse landscape of stakeholders in the system. So there's communities, we have material recovery facilities, there's companies, there's manufacturers, but at the end of it, we also have a lot of people. So we work with companies and manufacturers, right, to achieve packaging circularity. We're also working with communities, policy leaders, MRFs, and people. So really every aspect and stakeholder across the value chain to really improve our recycling system. And so we talked about all these different individual recycling programs and different accepted material lists. And while a lot of us probably on this call recognize that recycling rules change, packaging evolves, things are very dynamic, most people don't expect change. And so we at the partnership believe we must work together to build a communications infrastructure that's really on par with the physical infrastructure required for a high-performing recycling system. Yeah. So when we talk about this communications infrastructure, what are we really trying to say? So I want you to imagine a world where people have all the knowledge and the confidence they need to recycle right at their fingertips. Communities have the resources they need to optimize their recycling programs and deliver better education to those residents. And then finally, companies know where to invest to solve their packaging and recyclability challenges while working within the new guidelines of future and current policy requirements. So one of the ways that we make this vision a reality is our powerful dynamic directory of information, and this is what we call our National Recycling Database. So a little screenshot here of what it looks like on the back end. But the power of the National Recycling Database is that the information is connected in an accurate and local way. So no matter where somebody goes, the information is always hyper local and it's up to date. So it's pulling this type of recycling information from the websites of all 9,000 community recycling programs, specifically about what materials are accepted locally, what types of programs are offered, and a lot of other recycling data points that many communities collect. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, great, now here's another place where there's recycling information out there. Isn't this going to cause more confusion? There might be some alarm bells going off, but we have a secret ingredient to this whole system, and that is the local knowledge that you all have. And that local knowledge is really where our Recycling Program Solutions Hub comes in. And I'll go ahead. There's a lot of text on this slide, so apologies. But the secret ingredient, like I said, is really your local knowledge and expertise. So in the Recycling Program Solutions Hub, which is a free open access tool, community coordinators can go in and update and verify their local data. So again, that's things like the types of recycling programs and accepted material lists. And that information then feeds that national recycling database, which puts the power back in communities' hands to control the information and make sure that everything that's in that national database is up to date and really hyper-local and accurate. And not only do we have this, data component of the tool, but we also have a lot of really amazing resources, toolkits, connection opportunities, and a lot of the work that Elizabeth's talking about, as we come and learn new things and pull together new reports and new information. The hub is really a great place to go for community managers to get that information and see how to implement that in their communities. So I wanted to just kind of harken back on that local verification of recycling information, because it's not only important for our ecosystem of digital tools, but it's really important for the recycling system as a whole. Community managers, right, are the experts, and you're doing a lot of that, almost all of the outreach and education work. So our goal at the partnership is really to enhance the resources that you have access to, but also connect other stakeholders across the value chain when we looked at that circle. So pull in policy leaders and MRFs and different groups. And our research shows that most people decide what can be recycled based on two things. So one is what the packaging label shows, particularly whether they see the chasing arrows. And two is what they believe the item's made out of. So is it something commonly recyclable, like plastic, glass, metal, or paper? And this indicates to us that people have a misconception, again, that recycling information doesn't change. So they may be recycling incorrectly simply because they're basing decisions on past guidelines and outdated knowledge. And again, that lack of understanding that it's a dynamic system and it's okay that things change and it's to be expected. So to bridge this gap, we believe that one of the answers lies in rethinking the types of tools that we offer. So that's back to that communications infrastructure I was talking about. And one critical part of this toolbox will be dynamic labels. So here's just another sort of vision of all of these tools and how they interact together, and really how they improve the recycling system as a whole, and they benefit you as a community. So the Recycling Program Solutions Hub, that is really the local recycling knowledge. That's where you have the power to control the recycling data, feeds the National Recycling Database. And then this third bucket that's at the bottom, this is the resident and consumer facing sort of portion of our tools. So Recycle Check is an interactive package specific solution. So it's a QR code, which provides local information immediately. So you can see a quick code, a QR code on a package, you quickly scan it, and the chatbot tells you if the product can be recycled and how to do so, but it's all based on your location at that moment. So that means that anyone in your community, whether they live there or they're just visiting, they have access to that accurate, local, and up-to-date information. And again, the database, the National Recycling Database, verified by local communities, is what drives the information that's shared out to consumers.
And this QR code is live, right?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, thank you. Yeah, if you want on this side, hopefully it's big enough. Can maybe put something in the chat. But yeah, if you want to check it out, here's your chance. But if you want to scan the QR code on this slide, this is for a blueberry clamshell, and you can see if it's correct based on the information in your area. So it'll ask you to include your zip code. And if it's not, don't panic. That's actually, in some ways a good thing. That means that the information on your local recycling website, maybe it's out of date, maybe something's changed, or maybe we have the wrong information. So please let us know, but then also make an account in the Recycling Program Solutions Hub, and you can go in there and update that information so it's correct. But the dynamic labels, yes, we think it's a great idea, but our research also backs that idea. And 78% of people actually think a QR code would make recycling less confusing. And 73% said a QR code would help them trust that the package will be recycled into something else. That's the stat to me that really stands out. I just think it's fascinating that seeing that on the package really enhances trust with people. It's very interesting. And then again, here, let me see, I think I have the link. Hopefully this will work. So if you want to try it out, please do. And again, it'll change based on your location. So you can also try to do it a couple times, change the location, and see what information you get. Awesome. So we've kind of talked about how all these tools work together. There's digital solutions, there's non-digital solutions, and we're really working to connect all of these different players across the value chains. But I want to spend, I know we're getting close to time, but spend just a little more time on the Solutions Hub so you get an idea of some of the other resources that are offered there. So I have this short video, tested this earlier. I really hope it works. So Elizabeth, if you can hear it, will you just give me a thumbs up?
This is the Recycling Program Solutions Hub, a free digital tool where local recycling staff can optimize the recycling program with data and ready-to-use solutions. Let's first visit the U.S. Recycling Map. In the U.S. Recycling Map, you have access to data on all 9,000 unique recycling programs in the U.S. And through the Recycling Map, you can access your community profile, which looks like this. And from your community profile, you can view sections like your general recycling information, your accepted materials list, your recycling program details, and your census data. And if you see any information that looks incorrect on this page, you can edit it through your community tab. To do so, simply click Add Community and follow the prompt. Next, all of the Recycling Partnership resources are in the Solutions Hub through our resources catalog. Be sure to take a look. And last, you also have access to all of the courses the Recycling Partnership is currently building and recent webinars from the Center for Sustainable Behavior and Impact. And if you have any questions on any words you come across in the Hub, be sure to take a look at our glossary. Thank you for joining this walkthrough of the Recycling Program Solutions Hub.
Amazing. I always like to cheat a little bit there and let my colleague Kevin walk you through that. It's a really great video. And one thing I wanted to call out as well with the resources and the course catalog, we did just release a new course about the partnership's grant opportunities. So if you're curious, if your community, is interested in something like that, check that course out. And then we also do have a webinar about the State of Residential Recycling report that Elizabeth mentioned earlier. So that's all in there as well. Oh, sorry. Perfect. I guess my slides are going to skip ahead, and we're at time, but either way, I'll say I'm really excited to see the adoption of the Solutions Hub continuing to increase. We have over 22 million, households represented by community coordinators in the Hub. But like any, digital solution, we really want this to be successful with your input as well. So feel free to make an account. Let us know if you have questions. We're always here to help and get you the information you need. Elizabeth, did you want to say anything else here?
No, I just want to say thank you. Our focus really is on reducing the burden of waste and reducing the burdens on the households and the burdens on the communities in the states. So we will continue to do research. We will continue to develop solutions. And we hope that you will be part of that journey with us.
Well, Lydia and Elizabeth, thank you very much. Question, just quickly, is the Recycle Check available as an app?
We don't have it as an app yet. We're working with some groups who are very seasoned in creating digital solutions and for healthcare and other sort of the crossover between people and their communities. And what we're trying to figure out is like, what are the most, the easiest to use for the individual and the easiest to manage for the community information. So I don't know that it won't be an app at some point. There's a really interesting case in New York. I think it's a New York community that has created an Alexa solution. I think there's just there's so many, once you open up to digital communications, there's so many opportunities for how that can, where it's housed and how it works. So I expect in the next year, you'll see more from us. Also, messaging, like digitally based messaging or digitally driven messaging that is like, for instance, print. Like I would love for us to create a solution where the database drives the print and it's a lot easier for the communities. A community logs in, says, this is what I want people to know. And then there's a back end that makes that process easier for all kinds of outreach. So
I used to hang around with this guy in the digital space, and he would always talk about being present at the moment of need.
yes.
And so when I saw Recycle Check, my first reaction was, wouldn't it be great if I could hold my phone up to whatever this thing is and snap a picture or something like that, and then have Recycle Check go, oh, I see what that is. And by the way, do or do not put it in the recycle bin. Because consumers, convenience and clarity seem to be the two issues that we struggle with the most. Consumers don't want to go to the drop off if they can possibly avoid it. They want to have things automatically picked up and chucked away. But clarity around what should be put in the bin or shouldn't be put in the bin is probably the bigger struggle based upon what you've shown so far. So I'm always trying to find what is the action we can ask the consumer to take with as little heavy lift on their part as possible.
Yeah. And that's why, like this local information being up to date and across the channels. So if the website is right, the local website is right, what's in the national database, our national database is right and current. And that way, when changes happen, we're on the verge of figuring out how to push out information to people too when changes happen. Because if we're gonna be able to recycle as many things as we can without having contamination, we're gonna have to have a way to keep people up to date on what that information is.
So there was a related question in the chat. It was offered as a rhetorical question, but I think it is relevant here. And that is, well, the question was, what's the typical per household advertising spend on this effort? Is there a high correlation between the advertising spend and the quality of participation?
Advertising spend and the quality. I think if you've worked in recycling long enough, the answer is it depends. And just telling people the same thing over and over again where they stop paying attention, you're investing in something where people aren't paying attention versus, what I did is I went out and looked at what was spent on the census per household and what is spent on, energy and what is spent on other like household behavioral campaigns and outreach. And that's kind of where we got, like, I'd love it to be $20 a household a year. On average, nationally, it's closer to like $1.16 or, $1.20. So, yes, I think brands are starting to recognize and they're at risk if they don't recognize that their labels have got to be accurate to the person who holds them in their hand. So, this is a great moment where digital is coming together with policies, with brands having a listening and an interest in closing the dots. We talk about recycling being loosely connected, but highly dependent. And so we've been working 10 years to kind of like close those gaps, because it is, it is like I need to trust that the next person that picks up my recycling is taking it to the next person, taking it to the next person, and then ultimately it's working.
So I had another question, and the answer to this may be sort of tautology, but to what extent does an individual's attitude towards climate change drive their desire to participate? And is there a high correlation there? Could driving the attitude about climate change actually have a bigger effect on levels of participation than education about how to participate?
I think what you're getting at is motivation. So we regularly test what is motivating. It seems to somewhat regionally differ. Milwaukee tested a jobs message that really works. North and South Carolina have your recycling means jobs, your bottles mean jobs program running. In Texas, in talking to people, it was more about it's the right thing to do. And Texas is a big state, so I would say in this one small community in Texas, and so it really kind of differs. And so it's not just regionally, but I think people recycle for different reasons. And the challenge of asking people why they recycle is I think they sometimes tell you the canned answer about it. and so the best thing to do is probably, if you can, test it and test it locally. The other thing that can work in messaging is social norming, which is something that works in a lot of like voting and a lot of other behavioral campaigns, and getting people to understand. But the problem is what's the social cohesion of your community? So if you are really what I found in the segmentation research is people under the age of 45, I think really just aren't as civically connected. Like there isn't as much social cohesion because there's so much digital life. There's social cohesion across like global social cohesion, but there isn't as much perhaps neighborhood or I've been to pay a utilities bill in person with a check, and like that's that puts me at a different sort of like understanding of how utilities work than someone who like puts their recycling out and it goes away, or their trash out and it goes away. So I guess my very long answer to motivation is I think there are a lot of motivators. Climate change had in the past, climate change had not tested as well. I saw a study, not our study, but I saw a study last week that it had ticked up as a motivator for people to do things. I think there perhaps are fewer climate deniers than there were, 5 years ago.
Thanks, 3.
So it's a changing topic, I think. But what is, in general marketing, like if I just was on a debate on LinkedIn on this topic of, is it better that I say, hey, Peter, and have a personalized message to you, or is it better for me to say climate change? Hey, climate change is happening. Which is better, personalized or pain point? And the debate among the behavior scientists was like, it depends. And if I have a pain point, that is personal. So like as much as you can make it real and human, climate change is kind of an abstract concept. Recycling is an abstract concept. But as much as you can humanize it and make it real is, I think, what really gets people's attention. And we have a great study about empathetic messaging and motivation on the Recycling Solutions Hub. So we have more information about that.
Great. Well, I know your website is a treasure trove of resources that if any of you who have not been there and just wandered around, there's quite a bit to be found there.
Wander around, yes.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing any fresh questions in the chat. Going to give one last opportunity for folks to post something. While we do that, just remind everybody that we've had a great opportunity here to hear firsthand from the folks who drove this work for the recycling partnership, and want to express our appreciation for the work that the TRP does. And a big round of applause, I think, for Lydia and Elizabeth for a wonderful presentation. Remind everybody that the recording will be available probably on Monday, and that we do have this conference thing coming up on June 10th. We hope to see everybody there. It'll be lots of fun. You get a chance to continue this conversation. And really, as I always like to say to folks, it's the content is important, but the conversation is far more important, because that gives us a chance to really understand not just what we think we've heard, but how other people heard the same content. So I hope to see you all June 10th. Again, if you're not a member, please support recycling in Maryland and join the Maryland Recycling Network. And one last round of applause for Lydia and Elizabeth. And thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great day and enjoyed your lunch.
Thank
you
you.
so much.